Hello everyone, and welcome to another breakdown by the Botch Pit. I'm Chris, Librarian of the Pit, and this time we're bringing up a topic many can't get enough of, while many wish it would just disappear. That topic is Vampire the Masquerade and its often controversial social commentary. My initial plan was to cover Vampire the Masquerade 5th edition and the debacles that came with its birth into the role-playing game space, but upon reflection decided to go back and dissect the drama that has far too often accompanied this particular game line. Before I start really picking this particular scab and no doubt leaving a scar with some, a warning. This topic needs to have a disclaimer up front. We will be addressing sexually and potentially uncomfortable topics as we move forward. This is not a beginner's guide or gameplay, but more an editorial, and therefore normal matters we may not discuss will pop up here from time to time. In no way do we encourage the following, for the sake of saying shit we shouldn't have to clarify. We are absolutely and completely against discrimination, sexism, racism, fascism, pedophilia, all those little loathsome traits that sadly far too often blight our beloved hobbies and lifestyles. Some people are scum, some are simply misunderstood, but those above mentioned wounds on role-playing are not to be tolerated. With that said, and hopefully being very fucking clear, I think it's time to begin. As was covered in the previous breakdown, Vampire the Masquerade was created in 1991 by Mark Reinhagen. From the get-go, this was something special, and like all new and scary things, it quickly became a target. In November of that year, it was already receiving scathing reviews, such as in Dragon Magazine, where despite recognizing its strengths, it was also blasted for poor copy editing and amateur art design, along with remarking how lacking the rule system was. The important thing to note here is that at the time, role-playing mostly consisted of Dungeons & Dragons and the other occasional TSR gameworks. It would be quite some time before gaming systems pushed a heavier focus on narrative and role-playing over rolling, and it would be even longer before it would become a recognizable force in the market. This would not be the last time that breaking new ground would make a martyr out of the wolf, but we'll touch back on that later. Also important to note that at the time, the idea of quote-unquote mature role-playing was not something running rampant through the culture. At the time, tabletop role-playing was seen in the same field as playing with toys as an adult. It was something you played with as a kid and outgrew, not something for you. You may notice that this mindset was extremely common at the time. Figure collecting, comic books, and video games were often too considered something to put away as you got older, and not seen as a form of artistic expression. Needless to say, however, art isn't what we're here to discuss today. The first major hit Vampire took was in November 25th, 1996. A mentally dysfunctional youth, Rod Ferrell, committed murder on his friend's parents with his then-girlfriend and two fellow madmen. Rod formed a cult, and though he came from a jilted childhood and may deserve some pity for that, he does not deserve pity for the act he and his group played out. Rod and a cohort murdered Richard Wendorf and Nauma Queen, while two others went and picked up some friends. Needless to say, this hit the news, as well as what the kids were into, and a new satanic panic was on. But to be real, this was far worse than the 80s scare. Why? Because this was an actual, inherently dark gameplay world as opposed to the fantasy setting of Dungeons & Dragons. It just garnered more attention. Ferrell landed the death sentence, and in time, as with all things, the drama settled down for a time. Aside from the occasional edgy content put into the books, Vampire managed to stay out of any sort of major news game issue for a time. Then in 2003, Vampire would land in the news again, though this time for a far less negative topic. The film Underworld had come out, and the House of the Wolf, along with author Nancy A. Collins, decided they just had to take Sony to court. See, the film's premise was far too close to, well, every damn thing for Vampire in the World of Darkness, namely Vampire and Werewolf the Apocalypse. Back in 1994, Vampire had published a story called The Love of Monsters, and while Vampire was still gaining momentum as the powerhouse of gaming culture, it appears some people would say at Sony had read the underground publication and borrowed liberally from the world. So liberally, in fact, that Sony very quickly settled in a private meeting, and the topic was never brought up again. That must have been one hell of a check, all I'm saying. Let's pull back a little bit. You'll notice I left a little gap out from 1996 to 2003. So what went on during that time? A Black Dog happened, namely Black Dog Game Factory, a very specific, mature, directed publishing game line within White Wolf. For the record, when I say mature here, I mean extremely explicit content. While I can't speak for much of the work they published as I did not own almost any of it, I did actually own Eternal Hearts, the fiction published under this imprint and written by Lucy Taylor, and holy shit, this book was extreme. We had necrophilia and fucking literal corpses, not vampires, rape, abuse, and pretty much anything that would make the light of heart pass out. However, as I was already a jaded little teen librarian, I was okay. But do not be confused. This was smut wrapped in vampire veneer. You couldn't hide this shit. You read it and you were like, it was... I don't know how to explain it, but it was definitely just porn interspaced with the occasional bit of Vampire the Masquerade lore and canon characters. It was wild. You'd never see Sasha Vikos the same way. Or Lashida. But again, if you're really that interested, go and look up on it. I'm not going to go into the details there. Somehow, though, the Black Dog stuff slipped under the radar, and soon enough Black Dog would cease releasing works under that imprint. One could claim it was that people couldn't stomach the content or that it was too extreme, but the fact of the matter is, mature role-playing had enough issues selling at that point in the market, let alone making it harder to get some of its already underground works out. While some things may have had the Black Dog label for explicit content, it would never again publish anything as extreme as Eternal Hearts, and served only to underscore how extreme and violent the content was. So, as we know from the last breakdown video, the original World of Darkness ended in 2004 up until its release for Torpor in 2018. However, not to be outdone, one could argue that in this day and age, Vampire is even more polarizing, and quite impressively, they managed to kick off a shitstorm with its playtest and early content before the actual book was released. 2 shitstorms, actually. The first was the pre-alpha playtest of Vampire the Masquerade 5th edition, from here referred to as V5, and it was called The Last Night. First off, try actually finding the PDF now. It's a bitch. I managed to find a copy of Rusted Veins, the second scenario, but I could not find the first. I digress. Before going on, we need to draw a direct parallel in this game line to sex and feeding. They are tantamount to being one and the same in a lot of ways. Blood is everything in this game, supplying a sexual rush to both predator and prey as they feed. It is the most intimate thing any people or person can experience together, alive or dead, and you even get hints of their personalities, memories, and traits of the victim you fed upon. When we meet pre-generated PC Amelina Bentheim, I believe I said that correctly, we find her to be a Ventru with the specific feeding type of feeding only off of children and very young teenagers. The first scene encourages the player as Amelina to feed off a baby. A fucking baby. Needless to say, the player base bucked against this, at least, the rational ones, much to the fans' credit. The newly formed White Wolf, or reformed White Wolf I should say, was already getting pushed back based on these moves, and hate to say it, they deserved every bit of it on this part. I'm a huge advocate of V5, having pre-ordered it months in advance and getting it first day it landed in the States, but even I have to say, what the hell, man? What is going through your head? You have a newly resurrected company in your newly resurrected flagship game line, and this is your first move? How much do you want to piss off your fans? It's almost like you didn't actually want it to succeed. Very mad were the fans, and the second instant really cements it. For the record, I do feel the second instance is under the concept of perception is everything, and I truly doubt anyone in the House of the Wolf supports any manner of neo-Nazi or far-right movement inclements. Unfortunately, though, they did release marketing that seemed to bring it to that side of things. When discussing character creation for Clan Bruja, a website named Dice for Dogs released a heated article covering not just the above, but leveling the not altogether incorrect image that White Wolf was saying that the character type of a neo-Nazi thug was a plausible player character concept. Once more, the Wolf claimed that they did not support that view, that it's a game about monsters, etc., but the fact of the matter is this. The new iteration of the House of the Wolf was walking a narrow line, and at any point they could just go that little bit too far. That's the life of the edgelord, isn't it? Even Onyx Path Publishing, frequent collaborators and partners of the World and Chronicles of Darkness lines, had to release a statement telling Nazis to fuck off. Also to be stated that the one major release Onyx Path did, explaining their stance, was much larger than White Wolf's paragraph glossing over the matter. So, again, nothing but love to Onyx Path on this. They were just like, yeah, no, fuck Nazis, we're not cool with it, and if you're cool with it, we don't want you buying our shit. So, it's really too bad that White Wolf didn't have that same sort of fervor with their reaction. Eventually, however, as expected, they did fall off the edge of the ledge of that edge, and they fell hard. In early November 2018, White Wolf released the Guide to the Camarilla, and you know if it's in this breakdown, there's a hell of a reason. In this guide, we were getting an update as to the affairs of kindred the world over, and a particular segment of this book took place in Chechnya. As many know, Chechnya and Russia have often been at odds, and the litany of human rights issues therein are remarkable in the most unfortunate meanings. Homosexuality is prosecuted and things, well, they're not great over there, even today. Especially today, actually, compared to the rest of the world, one could say. So, when the book came out and used real-life leaders, quote-unquote, and tragedies as lore backdrop for Vampire and the Camarilla specifically, enough was enough. The fiction claimed that the Kindred were using these heinous acts to the benefit of the Masquerade, using real human tragedy as a backdrop to explain the secret wars that the vampires were involved in. At this point, Paradox, the owners of White Wolf, stepped in and took their newly reminted toys away. Paradox was wise, and shifted second-party development to Modiphius and Onyx Path Publishing, respectively. Both of these were wise decisions, as Modiphius had been printing the books anyways, and Onyx Path have arguably done better with the lines than White Wolf itself has. As of this moment, the drama has quieted down with cooler heads at the helm, and Vampire is arguably doing better than ever. The newer people involved know how to keep their friggin' mouths shut when it comes to actual topical events, and just stick to the lore, stick to the game, and keep things, I don't want to say safe, because that's really not the way it is, but definitely less controversial in the ways that you shouldn't be bringing a game line into. With many new books and 2 video games on the way, Vampire is poised to be larger than ever, and I for one am thankful. It's where I started. While Vampire the Masquerade is not my favorite game line by a long shot, it holds a special place in my heart because of what I just said, and I'm proud of both where the developers' minds are now as well as the fans of the game's morality. If you had said back in 1999 to 2005 that World of Darkness fans really would have bucked against something as significant as that, it really makes you proud as a role player and as a gamer to see how far we've come in a short amount of time. People saw bad shit happening with their beloved game, and they stood against it. They didn't accept it, and while there are always a few bad eggs in the dozen, for the most part we showed our true colors when negativity showed its visage. Well, I hope you found this entertaining, and perhaps at some point I'll go over White Wolf Controversies as a whole, but is there anything I missed in this report that really matters to you, something that you felt like should have been shouted out or denigrated or anything? Let me know. I have no allergy to sequels. Once more, this is Big Chris, Librarian of the Pit, and thank you for your time. Have a great night, and watch out for those pervy fucking Ventrue, Jesus Christ.